So I guess the question is, why does the Army Corps of Engineers want to meet now, tonight, on January 8th, 2025? And the answer is that we are in the process of updating our community involvement plan. It was last updated in 2019, and we're trying to solicit feedback from you on how we can better inform you about the project. And that could be in various different ways. So we want to hear from you. And the best way to do that is to fill out the questionnaire. And if you haven't done it already, there are some hard copies here. I can help you if you need to get to the website. But there's a QR code if you're tech savvy, and then there's the website path. And to kind of help you with the questions you might have, I'm going to provide just a high-level overview of our project, some of the work that we've done recently, and then work that we're planning to do in the near future. So the agenda is I'm going to start with a site history, which is going to be rather brief. It's only a couple slides. I'm sure you're all locals and you're very familiar with the site. But for those of you who are on the video or may not be that familiar, I'm just going to provide a site history. The federal cleanup program, just to provide the context for the framework for which the Army Corps works under. I'm going to hammer home a couple times planning and coordination, because that's critically important to our mission. Part two, I'm going to go over our the projects that we're currently working on. And then part three, it's Restoration Advisory Board. This is one method for which the community can be involved in our project. It's just one of many different ways for the community to be involved. And the best way to kind of show you that is just to explain to you what it is, so that you can make a decision as to if it's something you want to form or not. So first, I'm going to go over the site history. So the Charlestown Naval Auxiliary Landing Field was acquired in the early 1940s by the U.S. Navy. It encompasses about 630 acres in Charlestown, Rhode Island. History, this is the beginning of the Second World War. It was purchased by the Navy to support the war effort during the Second World War. It was used primarily for training aviators and flight crews during the Second World War. The field was kind of the place where a lot of the night fighters that were fighting in Europe were trained. One of the more famous pilots was President George Bush Sr. It was used throughout the Second World War into the Korean War era and supported the Quonset Point Naval Air Station, which, if you're from around here, you know that that's a significant U.S. Navy hub. The property became idle in the 1970s with the Navy, and it was transferred to the town of Charlestown and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for beneficial reuse in 1981. I'm sure you've been there, and I'm sure you've enjoyed the many resources that it has to offer. But the town and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuge used it for recreation and conservation. So that's a little bit about the site history. And now I want to explain a little bit about the cleanup program for which we work under. So one of the major milestone laws in the United States is CERCLA. That's the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. It was passed by Congress in 1980, and there's a lot packed into that law. But one of the things is it establishes the framework for which the federal government would clean up properties. And the process in CERCLA is outlined here on the screen. So it starts with a preliminary assessment and site inspection. This phase basically is to identify potential sources of spills or releases to the environment. And then a site inspection, or an SI for short, would be to determine whether there's the presence or absence of a spill. And if a spill was identified to be present during an FI, it's likely that it would go to a remedial investigation. The purpose of the remedial investigation, at least one of them, is to Now we know there's a spill and we want to determine the nature and extent of it, like the three-dimensional area for which it covers and what media it's in order to position us to perform, to get into a remedial decision and ultimately perform remediation if necessary. So there's a feasibility study, which is what are the remedial technologies available to us to clean it up. It's not shown on the screen, but kind of in between these two phases, there's like a proposed plan. So, the government would come to the public and say, this is what we plan to do. There's a public meeting. All parties come to agree on what that remedy is. And then there's a remedial design, remedial action, which is just designing the remedy and implementing it as part of remedial action. Remedial actions can be a whole host of things. One of them could be, for instance, groundwater treatment. And if there's a system that's installed, there's operation and maintenance of that system. So then that goes into remedial action operation. And then the last phase is long-term management, which is at the tail end of a remedy where it's, for instance, there's residual contamination that's being monitored over the course of years or decades to see if it's going to rebound, just to gather more information. And then it's worth pointing out that anytime during the CERCLA process, a removal action can be initiated, which is if there's any sort of imminent threat to human health, safety, in the environment. So you don't have to wait all the way till this phase for something to be done. It could happen at any phase. And then just as a point of clarity, like there's a lot in CERCLA, and one of them is EPA's national priority list, which is their list of the most important sites for which they conduct their own investigation and remediation. And that's commonly referred to as the Superfund sites. CNALF is not on the EPA's national priority list. So I guess in lingo, it's not technically a Superfund site. So just a point of clarification. So you might ask, why is the Army cleaning up the Navy's property? And that's a good one. And I'm going to explain why. So after CERCLA, there's this other milestone piece of legislation in the country, the Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act, or SARA. It was passed in 1986, and it, amongst other things, codified that the Secretary of Defense shall carry out environmental restoration for facilities under jurisdictions of the Secretary. So the Secretary of Defense is responsible for cleaning up all branches of the military. And from that, it was basically through a course of different directives and so forth, the Army Corps' responsibility to implement the formerly used defense sites program. So any property that was transferred prior to the passage of SARA in 1986 would fall under this FUDS program, and then the Army Corps of Engineers would be responsible for implementing the program. So that's why we are here. And then the two kind of criteria that I have on the screen here is it's a property that was owned, leased, or by the DoD prior to the passage of the law, and that there must have been a hazard of contamination that was released by DoD on site while DoD had jurisdiction over the site. So that would be DoD spills before 1981, when CNALF was transitioned over to the town and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So key points here is really two. The cleanup follows the CERCLA process. And then the second one is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is tasked with executing the cleanup program at CNALF under the FUDS program. So planning and coordination, a few slides, and I just want to show you the importance of why coordination with the town and U.S. Fish and Wildlife is important to us, and I hope it's important to you too. So there are a lot of events and activities that occur on Ninigret Park. I've named just a few of them. I was driving there today with Tracy, and you can see where there was a giant New Year's Eve bonfire with the town. And so when we're planning our activities, we need information from the town in order to kind of accommodate them. So there's no conflict with our schedules and people's enjoyment of the park and then the refuge. Dark Skies International, because there's an observatory there, there's a lot of sensitivity to light pollution at night. So that's something that we implement as part of our plan to kind of allow the observatory to maximize their use of the night skies. Wetlands protection, and then because of the wildlife refuge, there's a whole host of wildlife restrictions that we try to accommodate. So there's noise restrictions so that we're not scaring away endangered shorebirds during their nesting season. We need to do brush clearing to access some of our locations, and we try to avoid doing that when the endangered New England cottontail's nesting, so we don't scare them away. And then also at the refuge, there's hunting. People enjoy it for archery and long rifles, so that's in the fall and the winter, and we do want people to enjoy the resources there, and so we try to plan and coordinate with all parties to make sure that you can. And then also archaeological and cultural resources is important. We do have an archaeologist on site. I know U.S. Fish and Wildlife does too. We did a study back in the 90s when we were kind of initiating a lot of our work, and there are archaeologically sensitive areas at the park. So if we're working in them, it's something that we have to consider in order to protect those resources. So this slide kind of tries to drive home the importance of like the two-way communication. So it's not only important for us to get information from you, but also we have information about archaeologically sensitive sites and prior investigation results in our investigation, and we want to provide that to you. So when the town and U.S. Fish and Wildlife are making decisions about how they're going to use those properties, that they can use our information to be better informed about their decision-making process. Also, if, because it's under active environmental investigation, if there were soil disturbance, like for instance, if someone were digging up dirt and moving it, or if someone were importing dirt from off-site, on-site, if it does interfere with our environmental investigation, just to point out that under CERCLA, there's this potentially responsible party under which a PRP would be liable for a portion of the investigation and the remedial costs. And so I think everyone will want to avoid that. And so the how to avoid that is planning and coordination. So now I'm just going to review our active projects one by one. So here's a map of the site. There's Project 8, and it involves 3 former boiler houses, and then also a underground electrical vault. The vault was used to supply electrical runway lighting for the runways. Project 9 is 3 landfills, which I'm going to talk about in detail. This is termed Charlestown Landfill, Eastern Area Landfill, and then Ninigret Wildlife Refuge Landfill. These 3 landfills have 2 parts of the project. One is what they call Military Munitions Response Program, or MMRP, which is to investigate munitions and explosives. And then the second part of the program is the HTRW, which is Hazardous Toxic Radioactive Waste Program, which is to investigate chemicals. We're doing them concurrently, but for the sake of the presentation, I'm talking about them separately. And then also there is a former burn pit area that's on the refuge property. So I'll start with the boiler houses. In the past, there was a demolition effort about removing some older Navy buildings. And as part of that project, we removed the 3 boiler houses. This is an article showing some photos of the demo from the Providence Journal in 2002. In 2021, we did some soil investigations beneath where the boilers were. The purpose of that investigation was to confirm whether or not that we remediated all the soil and that there wasn't any residual left requiring further action. And the results of that was that during the demolition and the soil removal, that they did in fact remove all the petroleum and metals that was in the ground beneath the boilers. So even though the boilers were removed, the electrical vault remained at the park until recently in November of 2024, where we demolished it and removed it off-site. Since it was buried, the only real above-ground feature, let's see the pointer. I'll just here we go. Yeah, here we go. So the only feature that you could really see was if you're in the athletic fields, there was this boulder and it was on top of this concrete vault. So that was the former Navy electrical vault. We demolished it and removed it from the grounds. When we did open up the vault, there was just sediment and material at the bottom that we shoveled into a drum. And then a lot of the electrical components were still there, so we had them pulled out and recycled. There's always a question of if it's an electrical vault, if there were a spill to occur in the vault, did that spill get through the concrete into the soil? So when we did remove it, we collected soil samples from the sidewalls and bottom of the grave, and we tested those for petroleum hydrocarbons, which is TPH, and then polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, which is associated with electrical oil. We did this work a few months ago. We're still receiving the laboratory data. So once we do get that data, we'll have a better understanding as to whether or not the soil surrounding the vault had been impacted. So Project 8, the key points is that the boiler houses were demolished and that we completed the soil confirmation in 2021. And then the electrical vault was removed very recently in 2024, and that we're just pending receipt of the laboratory data to confirm whether or not we're done. So now that was Project 8, and I'm going to talk about Project 9, but I'm going to talk about it in two parts. The first part is the Munitions and Explosives Program, or the MMRP. So again, just to refresh, the three landfills are right here. In 2023, we did a geophysical survey of all three landfills. The geophysical survey, for lack of a better term, it's like underground radar that determines the changes in soil conditions and also is useful in detecting if there's any metallic anomalies. And because there has been filling that occurred in these landfills, we don't really know what those metallic anomalies are. They could be munitions, they could be a mattress, they could be a refrigerator or a Jeep or an airplane, who knows. But this geophysical survey kind of created these like tie-dye maps, and you can kind of think of it as like a weather map where if it's, kind of red and orange, it's where they detected more metal underneath the ground. And so our next step is to do test pitting. So we have munitions experts on site, and then they're going to be slowly kind of clawing back the soil to do visual observation to identify what exactly that metal is, so that we can have a better understanding. And those test pits are shown. They're kind of these like black squares on the map. This is the Charlestown landfill. This is the Eastern Area landfill. And this is what's known as the Ninigret Wildlife Refuge landfill. If it's important knowing that if you are enjoying the park and you're minding your own business, but you do see something that looks unusual, the DoD likes to advertise the 3 R's, which are recognize, and you don't have to be experts, but if you do see something that's unusual, you recognize it, and then you retreat from it, which is, do not approach it, touch it, or disturb it. Please do not take it home as a souvenir. And then it's reported. So if you know the location, the step for you would be call 911, and then they have resources, or the state police, or they can have reached back to us where we can get support from Baltimore. So it's the 3 R's. So if you don't remember anything from this part of the presentation, remember the 3 R's. And here are some pictures. We did a site investigation for munitions, and these are some of the photos from that. So these are dummy bombs. They're like 1,000-pound inert practice bombs. They're filled with sand, but they were used by the pilots for training. And then also I'm not really sure where this is. I think it's in the Ninigret Refuge landfill, but there are some remnants of munitions debris. This one is like a 30 caliber bullet. So if you do see something that looks like that, it's the 3 R's. So key points is, recognize, report, retreat. Just the knowledge that it was a military airfield and munitions and explosives were used and stored there. And then our investigation, we completed the geophysical surveying of the landfills and that we are planning to do test pitting. And I'm going to get the schedule at the end, so I will get there. All right, so again, just a reminder, we have the landfills, the burn pit area, and this dashed line is another area I'm going to talk about, which is the water, what we call the water supply well area. So the investigation, we've done work in the past out at the Ninigret Park and the refuge, but a lot of those prior investigations were limited in scope, where they were only investigating a particular part of the park and for a particular analyte list. So to fill in those limitations, we have an investigation that addresses what we call data gaps in order for us to better understand what's going on at the park as far as the environmental contamination is concerned. And so the purpose is to assess the nature and extent of contamination as it relates to DoD operations, evaluate potential human health and ecological risks related to former DoD operations. And then we also have, we're testing for a pretty comprehensive list of analytes. These are all, without going down chemistry class route, different chemical groups. So volatile organic compounds are like oils and chlorinated solvents that readily volatilize. Semi-volatile ones are ones that kind of volatilize. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, that group of chemicals is mostly associated with like ash. Metals, dioxin furans, PCBs, which we talked about, explosive chemicals, which is like TNT. And then the new kid on the block is per and polyfluorinated alkyl substances, or for short, PFAS. Our investigation includes a ton of tasks. Without going through each one individually, kind of the earlier tasks are, we do vegetative cover surveys for invasive species and native species, brush clearing so we can access our work areas and work safely. We do sampling of all sorts of media, from tap water, surface and subsurface soil. For marine and freshwater areas of the park and the refuge, we collect sediment, surface water, and then pore water. The pore water is essentially the space in between sediment where there's water that we actually are able to collect and test. And then we do well installation, a lot of wells that we install. And then we were rehabilitating some historical wells that were predating the Army's involvement. But because they're there, we're trying to collect data from them. Bedrock borehole geophysics. So we have a company that goes out and they put down equipment to determine the dip and and orientation of different fractures in bedrock. And then some of the back end work we do, groundwater modeling, analysis reporting, and then finally, the last one is public communication. So we need to inform you guys about what we find. So this is kind of our task list. It's not all of them, but it's some of them. But let's talk about PFAS. So PFAS, it was discovered in the 1930s, and PFAS is a term, it's like a simplified term for thousands of different types of fluorinated compounds, like individual chemicals. So when you say PFAS, you're really talking about many different types of PFAS chemicals. When it was discovered, it was found to have very advantageous properties, like waterproofing and stain resistance. And so later on into the 1950s, marketing folks get a hold of this and they start applying it into products, from clothing for the waterproofing properties of it. So like Gore-Tex was a derivative of PFAS, food packaging, upholstery because it has stain resistance. So it would be in carpets and sofas and couches and love seats and so forth. Non-stick cookware in the 1950s used PFAS. But what I want to talk about, what we're going to talk about tonight specifically, is aqueous film forming foam, or AFFF. They found that PFAS would create a thin film over a fuel spill. And so when it's over that liquid, it would snuff out the fire and then also prevent the fire from reigniting. And because of those properties, it was of significant interest for firefighting, in particular the Navy, because the Navy has had incidences of significant fires. In 1969, there was an accident on the USS Enterprise aircraft carrier, and after a series of explosions, it caused a major fire that killed sailors, injured many, and the cost, I believe, in today's dollars is somewhere around $1 billion to repair, not to mention that aircraft carrier being out of service. So in the 1970s, it starts to becoming phased into the military and used as part of their firefighting arsenal to save lives and property. The downside of PFAS is that it's persistent in the environment. So persistent means that it doesn't degrade readily. And it has been detected globally in air, rain, soil, surface water, groundwater, wastewater treatment discharge, and septic systems, probably because it has some consumer applications. And then determining the PFAS, determining the source of PFAS contamination requires careful examination, analyzing the different types of chemicals, their distribution, how it's moving through the environment, through groundwater, through soil. And then various studies have shown it has adverse human health effects. And some of the regulatory criteria is rather low, like 4 parts per trillion or in the nanogram level in drinking water. So here are some historical photos. And since we're talking about firefighting, we start with the burn pit. And I just want to point out these photos are Larry Webster photo album. So this is the burn pit that was at Senalf. And if you can kind of orient yourself, it's on the refuge property just over the line from the town. This aerial is from 1962, and it does clearly show these black burn scars where the fire training occurred. And this was used for training on how to put fires out on aircraft carriers. And right here on this aerial photo is the former catapult. So there's also, thanks to Larry, photos of burned out aircraft fuselages. These are from Senalf, and then someone's VW Beetle. So we investigated the burn pit, and we did these gridded samples. They're about every 30 feet, I think, every 30 feet. And we collected 120 surface soil and 240 subsurface soil samples. We also tested sediment, pore water, and surface water around the vernal pool that was just to the south of it. We installed 27 monitoring wells, and we used information from a historical well to understand what was going on at the burn pit. And the preliminary findings that we're getting so far is that this PFOA, it's one of those PFAS compounds was detected in soil beneath the central burn scar. And I'm going to show you a picture of a map on the next slide. And it was found in soil and groundwater, and we think that it was derived from AFFF used for firefighting training. We also found dioxin furans in residual petroleum, which is not surprising because those are typically associated with burning activities. So here's one of our preliminary maps here. And so this is kind of the burn scar that you saw on the aerial. And in the center, the highest concentrations in soil are kind of in the center of the burn scar. The hashed areas here, like where these black kind of blobs, the hash marks, is the overlay with the burn scars. So, the highest concentrations are where burn scar is. This is groundwater. So as of, today we've installed, 27 wells, and based on the information we collected, this is kind of an interpolation of what the groundwater flow looks like. And so we detected PFOA in groundwater, and it appears to be emanating from the central portion of the burn scar. And this is the arrows here are groundwater flows. And so it would be emanating south, kind of the southwesterly direction. So this would be going further into the refuge. So what are we doing about it? Next steps. We are preparing a work plan that will go to Rhode for review, and that will include testing of soil and groundwater. We're going to install more wells. The purpose of that is that we can better define what the extent of the PFOA is in soil and groundwater in order to better inform, what our next step is as part of a proposed plan. And we're also going to test more around that vernal pool to confirm our understanding of interaction between groundwater and potential surface water. So the key points about the burn pit is, we, based on our preliminary findings, detected PFOA in soil and groundwater, and that we're going to be doing collecting additional information to better our understanding of that PFOA at the burn pit. So I'd like to talk about the landfills. I'm going to start with the Charlestown landfill. I'm going to do my best to try to orient you based on these aerial photos. It's over on the eastern side of the site. If you were going to the refuge parking lot, I think you'd drive down this road. And so, is that right? Yeah. I shouldn't make a noise. I know what it was for. So you drive down this road, and the parking lot would be like over here. So this was used for treating wastewater discharge from the airbase. These are sand filters used for waste treatment. And then there would be overflow ponds, which are right here, which would be used for overflow from that sand filter. These maps were provided to us by the Army Geospatial Center, and that they highlighted some areas where there was fill, apparently based on overlays year after year of aerials. And so we don't really know what that fill is, hence why we're investigating it. So we installed 35 monitoring wells at 15 locations. The reason the numbers are different is because we install them at different depths, so we can get different groundwater depths from overburden. We did the geophysical surveying as part of the MMRP. We did testing of the groundwater, and then we found, again, that PFOA compound as part of that PFAS group of chemicals in groundwater, down gradient of the former overflow ponds. We also found elevated levels of salinity in some deep wells, which is not surprising considering its proximity to the ocean.
Yep.
So again, I'm going to show you a couple groundwater maps. So this is similar to the one I showed you before. And if you can kind of orient yourself, again, there's that sand filter this is more like a newer photo. So this is what was formerly there. And then the overflow ponds were probably around here. So the highest concentrations appear to be where the overflow ponds were. So next steps is we're putting together a work plan to better define our understanding of lateral limits of the PFOA groundwater plume. That investigation involves installing more wells, collecting more soil samples. We're also doing a background study as well, so that we have a point of comparison with areas that are unimpacted. So key points for the Charlestown landfill here is that we found PFOA down gradient in the landfill, and that we're going to be conducting in the next year gathering additional information to better our understanding of that PFOA plume.
Sure.
So then there's the two other landfills. I have them both up on the screen. This is we call it the Eastern Area Landfill, but it's just south of the Charlestown Landfill is like right here. The Eastern Area Landfill is just south of it. That 30 is still there if you go to the refuge. So it's right next to that. And then many of you may have walked that hiking trail that kind of goes around the pond. This actually used to be its own island, but then based on our aerial investigation, there appears to be some filling that happened. It could have been fill to extend the runway.
More courtesy of Larry Webster, but the yellow stars with numbers are Larry Webster's database, where he has identified the specific aircraft components, the type of aircraft, what is there, in a database that he has created. So, as I mentioned, freakishly, like no other landfill I've ever worked on, we have high level detail of the specifics of what's in the landfill, because he looked at this when the Navy was still here to catalog it for the aircraft components. So that's what those are showing. But they weren't actual crash locations, just to clarify.
Okay.
These were aircraft hulks, most of which were used at the fire training area and then later taken to the landfills and disposed at the landfills.
Thanks for the point of clarification, Tracy. So this is Eastern Area Landfill. This is the Ninigret Wildlife Refuge landfill. It's located like further into the refuge. If you've ever walked back there and you saw bunkers, concrete bunkers, those are right here. They were used for storing high explosives. But we did find, based on this aerial investigation assessment, that there was areas of fill that was around that bunker, which, makes it a landfill. So the work completed so far is we've done a lot of MRMRP due diligence here with the geophysical investigation. We still have yet to install our monitoring wells and do the groundwater sampling, and then collect soil samples from around those two landfills. So the key point about these two landfills is that our investigation's underway, and we're going to be gathering groundwater and soil information to better understand them. So this next area is the water supply area, which is this square. It was kind of drawn where, well, I'll tell you on the next slide, but it's pretty much in the center of the Ninigret Park. And the reason why it's of our interest is there was a former fire station in this water supply area amongst like other buildings that supported the Navy. And then there are also features like the Little Nini Ponds, and then there are supply wells that supply the Seafood Festival, which is only operating for a few days to a week throughout the year just for the Seafood Festival. The Beach Pavilion well, which is for the beach pavilion for hand washing and flushing toilets. And then also the Frosty Drew Observatory and Science Center. So the work completed is we did 2 rounds of testing of surface water at Little Nini Pond. We installed 26 monitoring wells. We tested groundwater samples from those wells. We tested 122 surface soil surface and subsurface soil samples. And then we also tested tap water from 7 public supply wells that not only are on-site, but 2 that are up gradient at the police and EMS. And then as part of this, we expanded testing to 15 off-site private residential supply wells. So the preliminary findings was PFOA was found in surface and subsurface soil immediately in the vicinity of the former fire station building. And then also this other chemical of the PFAS group, or PFOS. I'm not even going to pronounce the name here. And then we also detected residual petroleum and in isolated soil locations around the fire station. PFAS was found in groundwater in our monitoring wells. And then we did PFAS testing of surface water at Little Indy Pond. It was extremely low concentrations that were only estimated at the base of what we can detect from the lab. But the concentrations do not impact the use of the pond for recreation. So more groundwater maps. This one shows this PFOA. So we have kind of higher concentrations up in this area. We're going to be installing more wells. So obviously we need better definition on the PFOA condition of groundwater. And then groundwater is flowing southwest. And then I do want to point out that Little Ninny Pond is special in the fact that it is kind of mounded. So groundwater is actually higher than the groundwater around it. So what's happening is the groundwater that's flowing from the north is actually kind of going around the pond. So next steps is we're going to be collecting 288 subsurface soil samples, groundwater samples from the existing and new wells. We're going to, as part of this program, continue testing tap water at the supply wells, and including upgrading ones of police and EMS. We would like to continue the private residential tap water testing. So there was 15 private residences that we already tested. We plan to test them again, in addition to expanding that up to 25 additional private residential supply wells. Again, I'm going to get the schedule at the end. And then there's a bunch of historical wells out there that we need to rehabilitate in order for them to be sampleable for us to collect information from. So we're planning on doing that. And then we're going to continue doing the surface water sampling from Little Ninny Pond, but we're also going to be testing the stormwater discharge and the sediment that's near the discharge locations, so that we can better understand what's coming into the pond from the stormwater system. And then the background sample, which is sampling an area that's unimpacted, so that we have a base of point of comparison to the data we're already collecting. So key points: PFOA and PFAS were detected in subsurface soil samples near the former fire station. It was also found in groundwater, and that we're going to be doing more investigations so that we can better understand what the groundwater and soil issue with PFOA is and PFAS. So removal actions, just to kind of recap, at any point during the circle process, a removal action could be initiated, and we have already done that. We have done a removal action on PFAS in drinking water that consisted of providing bottled water and installing point of entry treatment systems. We've done it at 6 supply wells. They include the 2 seasonal public supply wells, at the Seafood Festival well and the Beach Pavilion well in the water supply area, and then at the Frosty Drew Observatory and Science Center. And so far, 3 private residential supply wells. When we do these installations, we do designs for each particular location because, believe it or not, the naturally occurring water chemistry from well to well can be different, like pH and hardness. And so we need to understand that in order to make sure that the system we're installing accounts for that during treatment. So there is a design component in these systems. So the key points is that, the Army Corps of Engineers has implemented removal actions as part of our CNALF investigation to treat PFAS in drinking water that consisted of providing bottled water design and installing POET systems, and that the EPA rules and the DoD policies around PFAS are very dynamic and they change very readily. and we're keeping up with it. But as those change and we adopt them, there could be additional removal actions. So I promised I'd get the schedule. So here's what we got going on. We are in the process of putting together a work plan that details to the town, to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, to stakeholders like Rhode, what we're going to be doing. We hope to get that plan approved this spring. The second item there, after that, we want to continue the tap water sampling. So spring, and that'll be multiple rounds, possibly to 2027. And then, essentially we have all the work I just talked about from the spring through the year, and it's going to be, you might see it as kind of stop and start, but we're trying to accommodate the uses of the park and the refuge. So there might be times where we're working and then stopping and coming back. But I would not be surprised if we're going to be doing some follow-on drilling into 2026. And then there's the reporting process too. Scheduling challenges, we try our best to accommodate the uses of the park and the refuge. With schedule risks, government contracting is like the most unsatisfying answer I can possibly provide. But, we rely on contractors. They require contracts. We have to go through a contracting process. It's just the God-given reality that we have to go through it. So that could have scheduling implications. And then I don't want it to be lost on anyone that CNALF is a very large and technically complex site. There's many areas we're investigating. There's a lot of different media, with both freshwater and marine media that we have to account for. And so that takes time. And, as we gather more information, there might be additional data gaps where we have to investigate something else that we didn't previously account for. And with more work could add to our schedule.
Okay, so my name is Tracy Epperly. I am a project manager with HANA Engineers and Consultants. And with me here today is also Andy Owens. He's managing the camera. He is our communications specialist. I'm going to discuss a little bit on restoration advisory boards. We like to call them RABs. Before I do that, I do want to introduce the questionnaire in case you haven't seen it or heard of it. And then also the New England District has a new CNALF webpage. And then I'll go into what and how to form a RAB and why you might like to have one, the benefits of having a RAB. So the questionnaire is available in both electronic and hard copy. We have hard copies here tonight, and it's electronically. We can email it to you if we can get your email. There's the QR code. Additionally, it's on the CNALF webpage, Corps of Engineers webpage. And the intent is to gather feedback from you on how you would like us to communicate, what method you would prefer, how often you would like us to communicate, and discussion topics, what you would like us to communicate about. We'd also like to hear back from you on your concerns. What are you concerned with on the project, the CNALF FUDS project? And then also if you're interested in forming a RAB and maybe being a potential member of that RAB. So this is a snapshot of the CNALF webpage. It's the upper portion, and the web address is at the bottom. It's rather long, so let me step out here. So is this it? Okay.
Right.
So if you can navigate to New England District's homepage, you can find at the top, the ribbon at the top, missions, and there's a pull-down menu. And then you would find projects/topics. And after that, you'd be able to open up where you see former Charlestown Naval Auxiliary Landing Field. And you can navigate to information about CNALF. So I'd like to point out some of the features of the webpage. Specifically, it has Greg's contact information. It's on the right-hand portion of the webpage. And additionally, it has interactive features. So the square boxes with news or the administrative record, the questionnaire, those are interactive and you can navigate to additional information. Greg, is there anything else you'd like me to? So now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about why or what an advisory, restoration advisory board is. So a RAB is a community-based, and I emphasize community-based board that meets regularly with the Corps of Engineers to review progress and provide input on the environmental restoration that's going on at the site. A RAB is made up of community members. So without the community, if the community doesn't want a RAB, then the Corps we're not going to have a RAB. The Corps will continue to communicate with you through other means, through public meetings such as this, through newsletters, however you would like us to reach out to you. Additionally, the federal government, state, and local governments would be involved in the RAB, and local groups and restoration regulatory agencies. A CNOF RAB would be made up of volunteers from the community as well as government members, and it has equal RAB leaders. There is a community co-chair and a Corps co-chair, and they have equal authority, and they are the leaders of the RAB. They lead Restoration Advisory Board meetings. The RAB would also develop a mission statement as well as operating procedures, and these help guide the RAB as they operate and conduct business. A RAB would meet regularly to discuss environmental restoration at the CNOF FUDS project site, and RAB meetings are open to public participation. So you don't have to be a RAB member to come to the meetings. It's open. The CNOF RAB would also review and provide feedback on CNOF documents, the environmental documents and activities that are going on at the site. And the RAB board would pass information out to the community as well as receive input and feedback back from community members to feed back to the government. The meetings would be documented through meeting minutes. Those would be made available on the website or in the administrative record. And all RAB members serve without compensation. It is voluntary. So I've told you what a RAB is. I'd like to say what a RAB is not. It's not the only method, as I mentioned before, and as Greg have mentioned. It's one of several methods that the Corps is going to use to engage you. And it's not a replacement for other types of community outreach or public participation. Corps is going to continue to involve you in what's going on at CNOF. A RAB is an advisory board to the government. It is not the decision-making body, but environmental decisions on restoration reside with the Corps of Engineers. So how you would go about starting a RAB, I'd like to talk about the structure and the guidance and the process of establishing a RAB. So restoration advisory boards have federal guidance or federal regulations called the Code of Federal Regulations, and Title 32, Part 202, discusses how RABs should be run or what the roles and the responsibilities of its members are. So specifically, I'd like to point out that this regulation requires Department of Defense to assess community interest in forming a RAB every 2 years. And the Corps New England District has done that for several years here. Additionally, 202.2 discusses the criteria for establishing RABs. So a RAB would be established when there is sufficient and sustained community interest. And this means that in between those 2 years when the Corps is reaching out to you, if the community decides that they would like to have a RAB, they just come to the Corps and say, we would like to have a RAB, we want to form a RAB. So EPA, as well as DOD, has taken this Code of Federal Regulations and made it more user-friendly. And they have guidelines, EPA has guidelines, and DOD has a handbook. And they have neither taken away or added to the regulation. It still has the same intent and the same requirements. Yeah. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about specifically what New England District has done. In this past summer, June 2024, USACE posted a public notice in the Town of Charlestown website, the Facebook pages, and the news. And they were assessing your interest in forming a RAB. And there was a comment period that was open until mid-July. The Corps did receive several responses expressing interest, and we'd like to continue that conversation today. Okay. So this graphic gives you an idea of the steps to actually form a RAB. We're identifying the need today. we're engaging you as the public, and then we'd like to move on to the other steps should you want to form them. I'll go over each one of these steps. So a selection panel is the next step. If we want to establish a RAB, we convene a selection panel, and that has some specific uniqueness to it. The selection panel is made up of individuals who represent the community's interests. It would identify community leaders and representatives to be on members of the RAB, and they would need to ensure that it's diverse and balanced. And the couple of unique things is it only typically exists once when you're creating the RAB. It can't exist again if the RAB dissolves and then you need to recreate a RAB. You would do the same thing. But one thing to keep in mind when you're convening the selection panel is that the selection panel is not selected as RAB members, so the third party. So the selection panel would establish the procedures for nominating community RAB members. They would establish the process for reviewing community interest forms, and those community interest forms would be something similar to our questionnaire that we have hard copy or online, where the community fills out the fact that they're interested in becoming a RAB member. And then the selection panel would establish the criteria for actually selecting the RAB members and then announce the nominees. So I mentioned that we want to ensure that membership is diverse and balanced. The green circles represent federal and state government. They would be engaged differently. They would be invited to the meeting. The Corps would actually be participating in the meeting. And then the blue circles, they're just giving you an idea of who you might reach out to, who that selection panel might reach out to. Local community, local government, residents, business, religious, or medical communities. It could be the Native American tribes could be invited. So the next step would be to establish, a RAB would be to solicit that membership, to get those community interest forms out from membership. And we want to make sure there's a wide distribution. So we can do this through several methods. We can ensure as many people as possible are being able to respond to those community interest forms. So I'd like to go over and give you an idea of the roles and responsibility. This is a busy slide. We do have it up on the poster too. Please focus your attention to the top portion of the rectangles. So we have that USACE co-chair and we have the community co-chair, and they attend all RAB meetings and they're the leaders of the meetings. Then we have the RAB members, and they also are expected to attend or at least send a representative if they can't. So that's the RAB. Additionally, the Corps can bring in subject matter experts to talk to you, such as Tracy or Amy, about topics, some of the activities that's going on with environmental restoration at CNOF. You might, if you need, you might have a facilitator that would be neutral, third party, either a Corps member or a local community member. Then you would have public participation at the meetings, and you would have you could invite the tribes, invite the state regulators, and even the Fish and Wildlife Service, since they have a vested interest. Regardless of who's attending, all RAB meeting attendees should observe the RAB rules and the operating procedures. And the next few slides, I'm going to go over the mission statement and the operating procedures. So now that we're ready to, we've got our members selected and we're going to start forming the RAB, we're going to develop guidelines to operate the RAB. So an officially formed RAB should plan to be in full operation within 6 months. They should announce their formation. They should publish their membership, announce their meetings and the frequency, and then develop that mission statement and operating procedures. And the operating procedures are set rules, guidelines that are set forth in writing so that you can determine how often you're meeting, what's your membership, how you're doing your membership, such as adding, replacing, or removing members. And if you need any conflict resolution, you would actually write that down too. This is a picture of an actual RAB mission statement. You'll notice that they call their operating procedures, they call them instructions. I've seen them called bylaws. But the mission statement should set forth the RAB's goal. What is the goal of the RAB?
Yeah.
So we're going to take all these pieces, the mission statement, the membership, how you're guiding your membership, the roles and responsibilities, conflict resolution, and we're going to put them all in and develop those operating procedures to guide the RAB. And so now we have our Restoration Advisory Board, and it's between the community and the Corps. The only Corps representative is that co-chair. Everything else is made up of community members. So this, I'm going to just give you some of the benefits of having a RAB. And I'd like to start with a quote from Herbert A. Simon. He was a political scientist and Nobel Prize winner. He said, "Bad decisions occur when decision makers are poorly informed due to incomplete, faulty, or bad information." So some benefits of having a RAB is it's an opportunity to become involved in the CNOF FUD's restoration process. It's a partnership and it's collaborative. It's a forum for exchange of information. It allows for more structured participation. And RABs, while they're advisory boards, they help inform those government decision makers, and that improves the soundness of the government's decisions. So a balanced RAB, it builds community, builds trust and relationships in the community. It's an opportunity to exchange facts and influence the perspectives of others. And all stakeholders it's that channel where information is flowing both ways, and all stakeholders are involved. A successful RAB aligns with the project with the community goals and identifies the most efficient and productive means for restoring our environment. RABs lead to better understanding, better communication, better decisions. They ensure environmental cleanup is responsive to the community's needs. And it's your community, as Tracy said, it's your backyard. It's an opportunity for you to get involved in what's going on at the CNOF RAB, environmental cleanup. All right, thank you.